This new sheriff has taken some many changes in our leadership, fixing problems internal first and working to change the LASD culture. He understands Los Angeles County Sheriff because he's one of us. The sheriff is on the path to do what he talked about in his campaign, and it is to reform, build, and restore Los Angeles County Sheriff Department. I am honored and delighted to introduce Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva.
Well, thank you, Ken, for those kind words. And the campaign theme of reform, rebuild, and restore, I was kicking around the idea with my wife. We were debating because I was planning on retiring in February of 2018 after 32 years, and pretty much I hit not just a glass ceiling, I hit every ceiling that could be possibly manufactured, and I was told you were going nowhere, period. I had a small cubicle office with no windows in Pico Station. That's where I spent the last 4 years of my career. And I thought, no, there's going to be a different ending than the one they had planned for me. In fact, most of my career I was told they had placed a limit on what I could do because I was not part of the in crowd. So the expectation was, well, don't expect too much. And I remember I had a conversation with Bill Stonich, who was undersheriff at the time, and I told him I'd like to have one day be able to entertain the thought that I could have your job. And the thought, literally, he almost sat back like in shock, like how could he even contemplate that? Because I was a lowly sergeant at the time, he was the undersheriff. And I just remember the attitude, and I remember people explaining to me how people who were in the car had these wonderful careers already mapped out for them. Oh, they're going to work this job, they're going to go over here, become a captain, then they'll go over here. And I was like everyone else within the organization struggling just to get to the next step. And I was rejected for a sergeant position 15 times in a row. And I thought, well, okay, some of them probably I'm competing with people that have more tenure experience, but at some point in time you start realizing, wait a minute, I'm the most tenured and experienced person in the crowd, and I'm still getting rejected, so it's probably not me. So when I got to the rank of lieutenant, the same thing happened. I took a lieutenant's test 4 times. I had the third highest score out of over 600 people the first time I took the test. And I had to repeat that test after test, but I could never get promoted. So then I figured, well, I don't think I have the problem. I think the problem is institutional, it's systemic, and it's destroying the integrity of the organization, the morale of it, and this election is a reflection of that. I knew there was that pent-up concern within the organization that we need to change the way we do business. We need to move from a cronyism and patronage-driven system to the one that's built on merit, because merit is what we deliver to the public in terms of quality public service, in terms of lowering crime rates, taking the bad guys to jail, keeping the straight sea for everyone. Or as my old radio car partner used to say, safe for women, children, and small farm animals. I think he was being facetious. But the point is just that. We weren't doing our job. We weren't doing our job internally with the organization. We weren't doing our job externally. And I knew there was a mismatch there. So I had the idea that, you know what, and I helped 3 separate candidates for sheriff run for election. One succeeded, Lee Baca. And then that fell apart, as you all know. That's old history. And then I helped Ray Leva. Then I helped Bob Olmsted. And they're now my undersheriff and assistant sheriff. And they had something to bring to the table, so I invited them back. They came back from retirement to help me out. But in the process of challenging the status quo, the entire political world literally lined up behind my opponent. All of LA City Hall, top to bottom, the Board of Supervisors. I had 3 brave souls that stood up to support me. They were elected officials, you know, high profile. One was Kevin De Leon, Democrat in the Senate. One was Philip Chen, Republican from Diamond Bar. And the other one was Reggie Jones Sawyer, the Democrat from the Assembly. And the 3 of them stood up and said, we're going with you. And I remember getting the phone call from each and every one of them. They said, we don't care what the consequences are. We think you're on the right path, and we support your effort. And Philip Chen in particular, that came at great risk because he had to cross party lines to do so. And he still did it without caring about the consequences. And that was an important lesson for me because that shows someone who's a true leader, that's doing the right thing for the right reason. And hopefully everyone who's in elected office is in there for the right reason. And I'm a horrible politician because I just say the things the way I see them. And along the campaign trail, I was surprised and pleasantly surprised that there was a lot of hunger for actually to get good information, get the truth out there. So when we started this in June of 2017, we were laughed at, ridiculed. There's no way in hell this will ever happen. Who do you think you are? All of those things I heard. I heard it from inside the organization, outside the organization. But we decided reform, rebuild, and restore is what we're going to do, and let's stick to that from day one. And the Times poked fun at us, saying there was more ducks in the park at Belvedere Park than there were supporters when we announced the campaign. But the same Times had to be their president when we were sworn into office on December 3rd. There's over 2,500 people packed into a tiny auditorium at East LA College. So that was one for the ducks right there. But the cool thing was, as we went along, moving along, going through the campaign, little by little, we realized that the public wants change. They're hungry for change. And we got group after group to support our effort. And these are reform-minded groups. These are social justice groups, Democratic groups, the Bernie Sanders crowd, all these different organizations. They were hungry for change. And little by little, as they started supporting, we started getting a little bit more attention. And then once we got past the primary and that miracle, then again, the Times said there's no way in hell we can't. The incumbent always wins. We heard the drill. You know, it's been 104 years since the last incumbent was unseated. Once again, we ignored the pundits. We ignored all the experts. And we just stuck to our game plan. And now we started focusing on organized labor. And they came to our support because they too recognized we needed to change what we were doing. So little by little, we assembled an army. And that army kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And yet, it still flew under the radar of the political establishment. Right up to the day before the election, they thought they had won. In fact, as you referred, Ken, on the night of the election, 10 o'clock, they were announcing pretty much that they won because they went ahead by 93,000 votes on the first count. My son told me, Dad, that was 99% absentee votes only. There's more than 2 million votes to count. So I figured, okay, I think we can do that. And sure enough, every single vote after that, the gap kept narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. Our restaurant, tiny little hole in the wall in East LA called City's Restaurant, they closed at 2, and we were still behind by about, I think, 10,000 votes at this point, but they still hadn't done counting. So we reconvened in our little tiny headquarters in East LA on Beverly Boulevard, a hole in the wall that you could probably fit this in here 10 times. And Carl showed up. I was there. Our campaign manager showed up. Then little by little, people kept joining. And before you know it, that tiny little headquarters was full of people paying attention to every single update every 20 minutes from the county registrar. 4:40 in the morning, we went down. We were down by 1,100 votes. We went ahead by 4,700 votes, and they hit the 100% mark. So it was literally the three-pointer as time is expiring, and the clock went down from half court, and we nailed it. And we went ahead, and then we remained ahead ever since then. So that was a shocker. So when people woke up the next day on Wednesday, it was kind of like in 1948, the Dewey and Truman, when they held up the newspaper. We had our Dewey-Truman moment there. So that was pretty fun. Of course, now the headache is now we got to actually govern, you know. Like from that movie, okay, what do we do now that we won? Well, now we're doing what we said we were going to do. Every campaign promise that I put out there on the campaign trail, that's actually a plan. Now we're sticking to that plan element by element. Some things are easy, some things are harder, but we're going to get through them one by one, and we're getting the input. Yesterday I was at the Civilian Oversight Commission, and I have a whole new set of fans from the pro-ICE and pro-Trump crowd that in LA County is not really seen in the same regard as they think they are, but they follow me around everywhere, you know, with the MAGA hats and all that stuff. But that's fine. That's actually their right to do that. We want them to express their opinion, and I showed up and I heard from them. And I understood my predecessor never did. He actually said a piece, I think twice in 4 years, and walked away. Never took questions from the commissioners or heard from the audience. But that's part of my job, so I'm going to be doing that. And I'm going to a lot of places where the sheriff has never been before, but that's where we should have been all along, which is with the community. It includes a crowd like this. It includes a crowd like East LA might be having tacos at King Taco at 2 in the morning. But we're going to be everywhere. We're going to try to do our best, and if we're doing something the wrong way, let us know. Hey, focus on this or look at this. And this is it's a wonderful experience. It's complicated, obviously, what we're inheriting, and we're going to have a nice press conference on the end of the month where you're going to appreciate what we inherited, because I've had people working day and night for the last 7 weeks, digging through all of the rubble of all the things that were concealed. Now they're coming to light. And so now everything I said on the campaign trail, you're going to have the holy cow moment. So it's going to be fun. But anyway, thank you for your support. Thank you, Ken, for the opportunity to speak. And then please enjoy your lunch.
So the sheriff is going to take a couple questions. Anybody have any questions?
What are you going to do?
Well, first thing I'm going to do is actually what I've been doing throughout the campaign trail. I'm never scripted. I don't hold anything back, and I'll take all questions. And one of the things I did on the reform side, first day, actually the weekend before we started, we sent out a notice to 18 top executives that their services were no longer needed. And that was literally the clean house part that I said about the reform. That's the first step of the clean house. And that's the easiest one because they're at-will employees. Now it gets harder because the ranks below them, they're not at will. And some of them are not too happy because their circumstances have changed. And something we did also, on day 2, we did an assessment of all of the leadership ranks, the lieutenant and above. We had over 450 people at the Star Center in Whittier, and we had them fill out pretty much like a biography, where we were going to quantify the amount of time they spent serving the community at the rank of deputy, sergeant, and lieutenant. And there's a lot of long faces there because a lot of people, they had this wonderful resume. It was about that tall, about all the wonderful jobs they had as administrative positions. But when it came time to actually quantifying their service to the community, 2 years. 25-year career, and all they could do is 2 years serving the community. What value is that to me? What value is that to the organization? So what we did is we flipped the entire pyramid upside down. Now, the people that are moving forward are the ones that have a long career serving the community, serving as a deputy, serving as a sergeant, serving as a lieutenant. And what that does now is everybody else is not in those jobs, now wants their jobs. So I have people that are in administrative positions that are quitting them and trying to find a line job somewhere, because we value what we promote. And we've been promoting the wrong people for a long, long time. That's how we got into trouble. And that's how people took advantage of people's weaknesses and vanities and insecurities and capitalized on that. And that's how we wound up with all these people indicted and convicted. So we're flipping the pyramid upside down, and that was the first step in that process. And then the fruits of that are now starting to bear fruit, because now I have the tide turning where people that are working in custody or in patrol, they're not in dead time. They are advancing their career serving you. That is a huge, huge philosophical and physical switch for the organization. And that's happening. Day 3, body cameras. What do we do in the body cameras? What's the plan? How quick can we get them out there and deployed? We have it up and running. Now it's going to the CEO's office for funding. And by the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have the body cameras out in the first 5 stations. And the plan before was waiting on 5 years and another study to then do another study. No solution in sight. And then Thursday, we went to the jails to see the situation with ICE and its relationship with the release of inmates and the transfer of inmates. So we've been very busy day after day, and we're making the changes. Some of them are long-term investments. It's going to take a while to bear fruit. Other ones are very quick and immediate. But some of the things that are pretty neat to measure is just attitude. We found information about the cost of long-term injuries on duty or workers' comp cases, $193 million. That's the cost, and that is a measure of low morale. When people are happy coming to work, they'll hop to work on one leg to be there if they enjoy being there. If they don't enjoy coming to work, any ache or pain gets magnified, and that's when you get your workers' comp claims start climbing through the roof. And this is true in your private sector and public sector. It works on both sides. And so your workers' comp cases are a measure of morale. It was at rock bottom, and now it's trending massively upwards to the point we're telling people, okay, we get it that you're happy, but don't be too happy to the point you do stupid things. So, but that's kind of what we're doing right now. And we have a lot more on the plate to keep chewing through to change fundamentally the organization, how it does investigations, how it does internal investigations. On the criminal side, our prosecutions, but our investigations make sure our special victims is properly funded and staffed with people to do the work, because they've been shortchanged, which means a lot of our child abuse cases have not been investigated in a timely manner for a lack of personnel. So there's a lot of things we need to fix that impacts public safety. But we're getting there. Big question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if you're planning on doing something to the screening procedure of who gets to be in the sheriff's department in the first place.
We have that. It's a challenge, because if you put the screening a little bit too strict, you start losing the numbers, and then you're in the hole in terms of understaffing, and that results in mistakes of another kind. You have overworked personnel that are working double shifts many times a week, and then you incur other types of mistakes. So you get it on both ends. So we have to find that happy point in the middle where we have at least a modicum of faith that the person is someone who is level-headed, square, knows how to de-escalate situation, doesn't have a chip on their shoulder, and is assertive enough that actually be carry out their job in law enforcement. So that's a tough one. Not an easy answer to that, and we're going to we're going to assess all of the facets of our background process. The polygraph exam is one area that we have some concerns over. The oral and the oral psych, all these different phases we're going to look at and make sure we're getting the best bang for the buck. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. The biggest challenge is inheriting a group of people that are so married to a certain way of life that they resist reform. And that's true of any study, social sciences, that your middle management ranks are always the obstacle to reform an organization. The top end, they're with you all the way, and that's why you select them. The people at the line staff level, they're happy if the change is positive. They're with you. It's the middle crowd that had a lot of invested emotional investment in retaining the status quo that disappeared. That's the obstacle, and that's the biggest challenge. And the biggest priority is getting the whole organization to work for the community. And there's so many different components of it, because it's an enormous operation. The 18,000 employees, we have 23 patrol stations, we have the largest jail in the nation, the largest mental health facility, and all these are manned by our employees. And everyone's doing different components. But we start by the simple things. My first day I got to headquarters, we were so busy the week of the swearing in, I didn't get a chance to go to the headquarters till like day 3. When I walked in the first floor, you walk by the cafeteria, and it was like around 10:30, and they had a meeting of the cooks right there in the cafeteria. And I stopped by to say hi. And I shook their hands individually. I thanked them for the job they're doing. That had never happened. I was the first one to do that. And that should not be. We have to value the contribution of each and every employee of the organization, no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing, no matter what rank. We have to value their contribution to be all a part of the same team. And when they're valued, they're going to perform. They're going to do what we want them to do. They're going to serve with pride, with a distinction. So that's my priority. I need to value everybody. Thank you.
Any kind of position on utilizing new technologies and looking for layering that in to help the department work more efficiently in the future?
Well, good question. One of the things we're doing is with the body cam itself, the issue always was about the cost and the storage. Now we're going to switch to the iCloud for the storage cost, and we're doing it and at the discretion of the officer to hit the button to record, that dropped the cost enormously to the point where now it's manageable. But as the technology becomes more and more available, there's compaction and there's definitely a hardening of the hardware, so it's more reliable, especially what we operate with, because something that you see at the show wasn't designed to roll around on the dust with someone trying to, hit you over the head with your radio. So there's a lot involved with it. But because of the size of the county, our purchasing power, we actually affect the purchasing or the habits of a lot of law enforcement agencies. For example, we're one of 2 agencies throughout the nation that do the testing of the vehicles. So what we pick ends up being what a lot of the nation ends up picking for vehicles. So we can drive innovation in IT by all means, by what we purchase, and we haven't been probably as nimble as we should be. Of course, it's a very big ship. So sometimes when we go through the county purchasing process, by the time we get to the end game that we want to buy, that's already 2 or 3 generations old, and they're on to something new. So that's one of the challenges of IT in the group of our size, an organization of our size. But very good question.
So we have 2,000 county buildings, 2,000 schools. We just had the fires. We will have at some point a major earthquake, maybe a terrorist attack. What do we do as a department to make sure that we're 100% prepared for it?
Well, the first thing we can do is make sure we're fully staffed. We're about 1,500 deputies understaffed, so we got to get back to full staffing. We have to get back to full training, so all our members are trained properly. Right now, we're only at 22% of compliance with state-mandated training. So those are gaps that we need to fill. We need to bring them up to snuff. And another thing is we need to do the training with our components involved in emergency operations. Our Emergency Operations Bureau, the efforts that they're doing, we need to integrate them with the rest of the departments so the training is one team, and it's a seamless operation. We have the issue of radio interoperability. We're crossing that right now. We're getting that lined up so everyone can talk to everyone. One of the big criticisms of 9/11, that no one could talk to anyone. Now we have the capacity to talk to everybody. Everybody can talk on these critical instances. So we're making some steps in that direction. There's a lot more we still need to do. And we need to work with a lot of the training with our civilian counterparts. When we have active shooters, for example, we have some training that we put out there was pretty dynamic, involving all the players and the first responders and how to integrate, and then with fire, EMS, and then all the different components of an active shooter scenario, how to handle that. There's a lot of work we have to do to keep training that. A lot of them are perishable skills. Some of these entities, some of the schools, they may never have seen active shooter training or drills, or they train a different way. Or the field personnel, they need to be familiarized with each and every school, what the school safety plans are, who the key players are, and then the staff of the schools need to know what to do in case of emergency. We have the standard, which is flight, hide, or then fight, option number 3. We never want to get to option number 3 if we can avoid it. So there's a lot of work we still need to do in that regard. But we're going to get better prepared. And the staffing is probably going to be the key that's going to allow us to be prepared. In the fires we had now, we're going to have an after-action report today. We're actually going to go through what happened, the after-action report of the Woolsey fire, to see what areas we can improve. So actually that's pretty current because it just happened last month. So we'll get up to that. Okay, well, thank you.
And thank you very much again for coming. We appreciate it.